November the 2nd, I had a call from a person in Santa Cruz, and she said, I'm looking for the pesticide-free zone people. And I said, well, you've reached one of them. And she says, they're going to spray us down here. I don't have internet service. I don't have email. I don't know what to do. And I suggested she contact her mayor and city council member. And I sent her down a packet of information, and I started communicating with folks in Santa Cruz to find out just what the heck was going on down there. They got me a so-called secret map from the California Department of Food and Agriculture dated 2007 that showed Marin County, San Rafael, Green Bay, Larkspur, Corte, Madera, all of Mill Valley, Tiburon, Belvedere, and Sausalito in the spray zone. When I confronted officials with this information, they said, oh no, that's all wrong. We're not spraying in Marin County. I attended a meeting on February 13th of the Marin Integrated Pest Management Commission. There were 4 of us there saying, what's with the spraying in Marin County? We were told that day by the County Agricultural Commission's office that they won't be spraying in Marin, you have bad information. Fact is, we had good information. They are intending to spray in Marin County. We've been in Albany, we've been in Oakland, we've been in San Francisco, organizing. This is an issue that has cut across political lines in this county like I've never seen before. There's Republicans, and there's Democrats, and there's Libertarians, nonpartisans. There's pro-growth people, anti-growth people, preservationists, developers. They've all come together because they don't want to be poisoned. They don't want their children poisoned. They don't want their grandchildren poisoned. So here we are this evening. This is a result of your concerns. We're working day and night to bring the message to Marin County. We've joined with Alameda County. We've joined with San Francisco County. We've joined with Monterey and Santa Cruz counties. And we intend to stop this madness. We're not going to let people do this to us. So what we've done this evening, we've got Senator Carol Mignon, who's come down from Sacramento to be with us.
Good evening. Hey, this kind of turnout shows we are mighty concerned. And when I heard about this nefarious little moth and that the complications that we hear reported from the good people of Monterey and Santa Cruz, to the effect of which they've experienced respiratory problems, uneasiness, illness, post-spraying, we're here today to say, no how, they're not gonna spray us. Yeah. They are not gonna spray us. That's scheduled. We know that the Bush administration hasn't served us well. This is a federal order, USDA. So what we're doing, just so people understand the jurisdiction, it's a federal order. So what I'm going to do, what I am doing, is trying to get a moratorium to get the state of California to ask the feds to back off now if there's no proof, number one, that it works and that it's safe. It's very simple. Does it work and is it safe? Rather, is it safe and does it work? Is it safe and does it work? And some folks have said, gosh, we should introduce bills and legislation. I don't have the power to stop it, but I have a power to raise the question, and you have the power to stop it, and together we're gonna make noise. And we have 6 months of noise to make before one plane is due to take off and spray anyone in this county. That's not true for other counties in the Bay Area. And we'll mention Contra Costa and Alameda. And I can tell you, when we first began this pursuit, I only was talking about San Francisco Marin. Alameda called up, Oakland called up, Contra Costa called up. Everybody said, what about us? And we're saying, okay, let's freeze it everywhere. The good people of California should not be exposed to pesticides, not a pesticide, an insecticide, and we ought not allow ourselves to be guinea pig. This is on the heels of the federal government that won't let us label cloned food, wants to start feeding you fake food, doesn't want to mark country of origin products, and they're seeping into our food and health supply, and we're here to say no on all of those fronts. Every one of them. Every one of them. So anybody that tells you this state moratorium isn't strong enough, they're wrong, because we are going to elicit support from this governor. The good people of California is going to let California's EPA, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Director of Health, and we'll line that up for you. They're going to get blitzed with emails, complaints, demonstrations. We're up at the Capitol next week. This will be a drum roll. This is an insist upon multi-layered step. And the next time, we're going to row another 20,000 people, right? Yeah. You're going to make it look like an Obama rally. I want it to look like an Obama rally here. And it's a lamentable thing. But you don't trust the federal government anymore. We don't trust the FDA. We don't trust the aerial sprayers. We don't trust these sets of decisions. So that in itself, they say it's good for us. We know it's bad. Now, what the heck kind of government are we living under, ladies and gentlemen? And we damn well better change it right quick coming up this year. So I say to you, this moratorium is introduced. I am engaged in conversations with the California Department of Health. We are going to try to have these kind of symposiums all over the areas, all over the counties, the 10 or 15 designated to be sprayed. And we're going to get folks together, and you're going to give us our emails, and you're going to barrage us, and you're going to speak out, and you're going to come to the Capitol, and you're going to come again, and we're going to come out as many times as we have to express our opposition and our right to try and live healthy lives without obstruction, and to not do battle with the moth. And I'll tell you, if you think that darn thing works, you show me, but otherwise I ain't going to be no guinea pig for a moth. How about you? No way.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
This is awesome. This is amazing. Thank you all for coming. In 2002, we organized 2,000 volunteers to go door to door to rattle the cages of our leadership, to put pressure on our community leaders and our state and feds to figure out why the cancer rates were so high. Back together we are again. This week we were able to gather over 1,000 signatures in 48 hours, thanks to many of you standing here. We put an ad in the IJ, we told the governor, we told our leadership that we need help to stop this spraying that we cannot sit here and watch happen.
Some of us went to the informational meeting chaired by State Assemblyman Jared Huffman on February 14th. We went with two simple questions. What tests have been done to ensure health and safety? Second, what was going to be sprayed? The next day, we organized Stop the Spray because of the answers we didn't receive at that meeting. We did learn four main things, and we compliment Assemblyman Huffman for bringing these concerns to light. One, the CDFA can decide when. We're going to come back to when a lot, because when is really important in this issue. When it wants to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. What is CEQA? CEQA is a California law designed to protect the citizens against environmental and other hazards. Under CEQA, an environmental impact report must be prepared before a project can be certified for approval. However, we learned that while the CDFA has to go through the EIR process, it can claim an emergency. They are then allowed to conduct the CEQA-mandated EIR process after the fact, closing the barn door after the horse is gone. In essence, completely negating the beneficial effect of CEQA. An example of after-the-fact certification would be the spraying that was done in Monterey and Santa Cruz counties in the fall of last year. Over 600 people have already fallen ill from the spraying. As of this date, we don't know how many more people will fall ill or the type or severity of their illness. The EIR process that should have protected them not only has not been completed, it has not as yet been started. What makes this even more egregious is the fact that according to the CDFA, the problem of the light brown apple moth was known a year ago in March of '07. They had plenty of time. Number two, the CDFA informed us that their goal was to find an environmentally safe, non-toxic method of interrupting the reproductive cycle of the moth, and that goal had not as yet been achieved. Great goal. How goes the research? The answer, the research has not begun. Could it be that because they have the authority to postpone the EIR process, their admirable goal has not as yet started? 3, next we were warned that if for some reason the state wasn't able to proceed with the spraying, the feds would come in and assume jurisdiction for them. We need to take this warning seriously. However, we are also aware that our federal representatives are capable and carry considerable weight. 4, and last, one of our questions was, what is being sprayed? Because of the 600 people who have fallen ill as a result of the spraying in Monterey and Santa Cruz counties, the CDFA has not finalized the reformulation of the spray. It now appears that even though the CDFA hasn't finalized the reformulation, they still plan to spray on August 1st. New legislation that takes effect in January won't help us. It appears we have only 2 possible avenues available to us. The first is successful legislation that removes state funding for the $69 million spraying. The second is an executive order from the governor. Even with the achievement of one or more of these goals, the specter of the federal government forcing the spraying still exists. A future step will be communication at a federal level with our congressional and senatorial representatives. In summary, a series of poorly thought through legislative and bureaucratic events have been set in place that will result in the specter of untested pesticides raining down from above on the children and adults of our community. This is the most pressing problem facing the citizens of Northern California in decades.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Assemblyman Mark Leno. I represent the eastern half of San Francisco, and I'm here to tell you that the neighborhoods and the communities in San Francisco stand in solidarity in Marin to stop the spray. And I believe that we can begin to stop this before it takes any further steps. Now, this EIR that we hear about, it's voluntarily being done, but isn't it curious that they're beginning the EIR before we even know, or any of the officials know, what exactly will be in the spray. So this EIR is fraudulent on its face. And because there's no legal requirement that an EIR be conducted, should the results be challenged, there's no requirement that any further EIR be done before the spraying begins. We know the serious health impacts that our friends in Monterey County experienced. So as a result of the outcry from the spraying that occurred in September, Assemblyman John Laird and Jared Huffman and Assemblywoman Lonnie Hancock and I are working collaboratively on a package of bills in the Assembly, which we believe will address this statutorily from a variety of different angles. So if we don't succeed in one, we'll succeed in the other. And I am in full support of the resolution which asks the state not to move forward with the spray. But it is that. It is a request. What if the request is turned down? We believe it's important to address this in state law. The piece that I have of this is to require by state statute that a full EIR be conducted, which incorporates health concerns before spraying can begin in the state of California. And that is what we're going to get in our bill. Now, I heard Skip's concern that a bill that takes effect January 1st isn't going to be of much help, and I couldn't agree more. we are amending an urgency clause into our bill so that when it is signed into law, it will take effect immediately. Now, as asked by a reporter here tonight, very astutely, well, if the governor and his departments are intent in spraying, why do you think he would sign your bill into law? The response to that is, with our collective pressure and tenacity, commitment, and determination, when we get a bill of that sort, or any of the bills in this package, to the governor's desk, it will put him on the spot. Governor, which is your first priority? The agricultural industry of California, or the health and well-being of your constituents? Which is it, Governor? And that is what he will have to decide.
The governor's name has been mentioned a couple of times, and you should know that Governor Schwarzenegger received $144,000 in campaign contributions from the makers of Checkmate. The pesticide is being spraying. Hopefully the governor's going to see the light.
It's good to know that the elected officials here in Northern California are paying attention to the concerns of the people of California. I say this because state officials, state bureaucrats aren't paying attention, and they haven't been listening. They haven't been listening for some months now. I was contacted some months ago by someone down in Monterey, a Levon Stone, who works with a group called the Fort Ord Environmental Justice Network. And Levon called me out of the blue and said, Paul, I just learned that they're proposing to spray pesticides here in Monterey. I said, well, you know, Levon, that's not unusual. There are pesticides, sprayed in our environment all the time. They shouldn't be, but they are. And she said, no, they're actually planning to spray them overhead. I said, well, Levon, do you live on a farm, or do you live, out in the country? No, actually, I live in Monterey. I live and work in Monterey City. Levon, that can't be, I said. There's no way they would be spraying pesticides over Monterey. And I think this is what the people of Monterey believed, what the people of Santa Cruz believed for many months, well, many weeks at that time. And then they were sprayed. We didn't believe that we could be sprayed by pesticides. There was no way our communities could be sprayed. I mean, clearly, the state should be listening to the people of California. We held meetings, we held public forums. People yelled, people screamed, people spoke out, they sent letters, they made phone calls. And yet, they still sprayed. And now they're proposing to spray the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, what we learned is that these state officials will pursue a program of spraying. We can sit down with them, we can have nice talks, we can make great logical arguments about how effective or ineffective these sprays are, about the 643 plus people that were made ill by aerial spraying, and yet they don't listen. So we've got to make them listen. We've got to go to Sacramento. We've got to hold more meetings like this. We've got to push our state elected officials and ultimately the governor of California to stop this spray. The person who can push that button, pull that lever, stop this spray is Governor Schwarzenegger. And so I want you to join me in this effort, join the folks at this table. Join me in Sacramento on Monday, March 10th with Senator Migden and others, standing on the steps of the Capitol, calling on the governor to stop the spray. He has the authority, he has the power, he can pull the plug, he can stop this spray. So as you leave today, grab one of these bookmarks. It tells you a little bit about how to get there, what to do. And in the interim, make the phone calls, flood the governor's office, and let him know we won't stand idly by. We won't let the people of Marin, we won't let the people of California be sprayed. No way. Who's here? Who's going to stand with me? Raise your hand. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Who's going to stop the spray? Thank you all for coming out.
Well, all I can say is, wow, I'm actually standing here in Marin. I have to say, Marin came into the picture for me only about a month after I got into this back in October. I put up the website, Stop the Spray, and started a petition, and you know, that at that time the CCOF had announced that they were supporting the NOP decision to allow this synthetic pesticide to be sprayed on our organic crops without relabeling them, the CCOF. And I posted this on one of the blogs, and I started getting responses back from people in Marin County saying, "You guys got to stand up for yourself. We'd never let that happen up here." So we started finding out plans that they were planning on rolling this out up as far as Marin County, and we started talking amongst a group of us and saying, well, you know, we got to get this word out to all the legislators all the way up to San Francisco Bay Area. So we came up with this notion of a legislative march where we would essentially deliver a copy of the petition and our legislative proposals to every legislator we could find. And it's a little nostalgic for me now because now I'm actually standing here in Marin. So it has been an incredible journey. Last night I was speaking in Santa Cruz where I spoke for the very first time in December. And I was kind of going over where we've come in the last 3 months. And I think I can happily say that you know, you folks here will all be able to stand on our shoulders as we go forward.
Just checking the shoulders to make sure.
Sure they're wide enough. Don't slip off. So back in December when I addressed the Santa Cruz, we had less than 2,000 signatures. We had just crossed the 1,000 signature mark, and we were extremely grateful for that. Today, I can announce we crossed the 11,000 mark yesterday. Absolutely. Nan Wishner is actually holding up a single copy of the petition and the comments in it. That's actually only 9,700. Has a great thud factor in it. Also back then when I used to talk to people, they used to tell me, it's impossible what you're looking for. You have no vote. They used to say, put your petition away, boy. Not going to do you any good. And today, as Assemblymember Leno just announced, I can report that there's now 5 different bills proposed from 5 different legislators, and the resolutions that are being proposed from even more. We've got tremendous support, and we've come a long way in the last 3 months. 3 months ago, we were calling and trying to get different nonprofit environmental groups to take notice of us. And we had some interest, but we had a long way to go. Now we have a list of over a dozen different, what are we up, 17, 18, 20? 24 different environmental groups that have signed on to the resolutions against the spray. The only thing I've learned, I think, in the last 3 months is that we can do anything we want to if we work together. As petition signer number 196, Christy Seabach, wrote from Pacific Grove, I have the right to fresh air. I have the right to raise my children in a safe environment. I have rights you cannot take away. And why not? I think these are fundamental to us. I'd like to read just a part of the California Constitution. Why should Christy think that? Article 1 of the California Constitution, Section 1, all people are by nature free and independent and have inalienable rights. Among these are in enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing, and not just pursuing, but obtaining safety, happiness, and privacy. That's what we want. We want to obtain safety for ourselves. So when I hear that legally they have the right to spray us with an untested chemical, I'm going to stand here. I'm not part of the Supreme Court or even a member of the state government, but I'm still going to assert that has to be unconstitutional. I think this boils down to a two-word question. Who decides? Who decides that this happens? Well, I think it's we. We, the people, decide what's safe to spray down on our heads. And I'm also happy to say that there's a bill, AB 2892, from Assemblymember Swanson, that also believes that we decide. To quote from this bill, it says, "This bill would require the Secretary of Agriculture, to first obtain the consent of 2/3 of the registered voters of the affected areas and counties." We decide. But I've also learned something since then. I had no idea the amount of misinformation that was going to be spread by our own state agencies. It didn't even occur to me that that would happen. So I also support the 4 bills that Assemblymember Leno talked about, which gives us, in essence for me, the informed part of informed consent. It lets us know what's actually going on so that we can make intelligent decisions. I think this is a good point to celebrate that we've got this far, because I know for a lot of us who have been working so long, it's taken a long time to get here. So we should celebrate, but we should also remember that it ain't over yet. I think that for me, a personal experience of how much further we have to go was sitting down in those EIR scoping meetings in Monterey and looking at the stone faces in front of us that were not even listening to the testimony we were giving. It was clear from our participation in that and from reading the expressions of the California Department of Food and Agriculture staff that were there, they weren't even listening. They sat there looking stone-faced, straight ahead, with an armed highway patrol officer standing behind them to make sure we didn't get out of control. I told them, where were our armed officers when you guys were flying planes with poison over our heads? Where were they? Well, we didn't have any. I think looking forward, we need to be diligent. We need to be cautious. I think the times going forward are going to be dangerous times. The Department of Food and Agriculture is going to do whatever they can to divide us and to ensure that these bills don't get passed and that we don't have the power to decide. I've already started to experience this. I have to say this is sort of my first attempt at doing anything like that, but I was actually called a word the other day that I don't know quite how to respond to. I was told that I was an activist. I guess I'm going to have to admit publicly here in front of all of you people today that I just might be an activist. But I'll tell you, that word was used to divide us. The Department of Food and Agriculture went to my colleagues and they told them that they wanted to meet with them in private and don't tell John Russo, specifically. Well, they did this as an attempt to cause us to fight amongst ourselves. But I'll tell you right now, it's not going to work. I'm going to stand together with them, and we are going to fight it. So I just want you all to remember that together we can do anything we want. Don't let anybody tell you differently. We can have this. Stand by your neighbors. make sure none of our communities are subjected to this spray from Monterey all the way up to Marin County. And in the back, we have some postcards that have the different bills on it that will help return the power back to us. And just remember that even though Steve Lyle, my favorite friend, spokesperson for the Department of Food and Agriculture, when this is over, I'm going to give him a big kiss. Because I'll tell you, what he says just makes the things that I do so much easier. Steve Lyle may think that the authority lies with the state, but you remind him every opportunity you can that the power lies with the people.
Thank you, John. Yesterday's Press Democrat carried a headline, "The dreaded apple moth has been found in Sonoma County." They found one moth up there, and they said if they find two, it's going to be quarantined, and they may have to spray. Can you believe that? 2 little moths, they want to spray Sonoma County next? We haven't even talked about Sonoma County because we thought they were basically home free. Nan, where are you? Come on.
Good evening, I'm Nan Wishner. I'm the chair of the Integrated Pest Management Task Force in the city of Albany, so I have the exciting distinction to talk to you about probably the least sexy topic on the panel tonight, which is pest control. But before I do that, I just want to make sure, because we haven't actually talked about the very basic facts, and there may be some folks here who don't know the details. We're talking about starting on August 1st or thereabouts, because there's an issue of weather for both the planes and the chemical. So exact notification is not really possible about when the spray will take place. We're talking about low-flying airplanes, 500 to 800 feet above the entire spray area, working through the night, probably 3 nights in a row per month, 9 months a year, 3 to 5 years, or indefinitely until the moth is eradicated. This is not a one-time deal. The chemical that's being sprayed, whatever pesticide they use, whether it's Checkmate that they used last year or the new formulations they're exploring, the components will be the same, they've said. The active ingredient, so-called because it targets the pest, is a synthetic moth pheromone designed to confuse mating behavior. So it doesn't kill the moth, it just confuses the male's mating behavior, which immediately might make you question how it's going to eradicate the moth, because it doesn't kill it. That's less than 20% of the formula. The other 80% is in so-called inert chemicals, and you'll hear from some experts on the panel about inert doesn't mean the dictionary definition of it doesn't do anything, it just means it doesn't target the pest. And we know a lot about those. They're carcinogens, they're dangerous things in there. And all of that's packaged in a microscopic plastic capsule that breaks down over 30 days into smaller fragments. Those capsules are small enough in the range of size, small enough, some of them, to be inhaled into the deep lung where they can't be expelled. And after 30 days, they spray again. So the exposure is continuous. It's not that once they spray, it settles and you can come back home. Why are they doing this? Well, that brings me to my area of expertise, which is pest management. They're doing this because they say the moth is voracious. Someone mentioned, I think, John, that there's been a lot of misinformation in the state's campaign, and I'm here to say to you in simple terms, because I know both the health and science side of this story, the state's science is weak at best. Integrated pest management, though it's often abused as a cover to use more chemicals, in fact is a way of working with pests to minimize or eliminate chemical use. It works with nature to manage a problem pest in the least disruptive possible way. It's based on the precautionary principle. If you're involved in environmental issues, you know the precautionary principle says you don't have to fully prove it, cause and effect scientifically. If you know there's potential for risk, you proceed with caution, you don't rush in, and you certainly don't put the burden of proof about the danger of a proposed action on the people to whom it will be done. The burden of proof is on the proponent of something that is a risk. So, number one, the state should be doing the research that I'm here tonight to try to share with you, because the burden of proof in this case has been shifted to us. We've gone and done our own scientific research. We've collected our own health complaints because the state would not do it. The first thing an integrated pest management practitioner asks is, do we even have a problem? I see an ant on my kitchen counter. Do I immediately get out pesticides and spray them? Or do I ask, do I have a problem? If I get rid of that ant, are there more? Well, if there aren't, I don't need to do anything more. The first option in IPM, after you notice a pest, is, do I do anything at all? Could the ecosystem be taking care of this? We have well-known respected UC entomologists who have worked in many quote-unquote pest eradication projects saying, based on the range over which this moth has been found, it's been here at least 10 years. The California Department of Food and Agriculture is saying there's been no crop damage attributed to this moth. None. In New Zealand, they say it's because it's the early stage of the quote-unquote infestation. In New Zealand, which has climate, crops, and fauna and flora like ours, as well as many of our precious natural native species like the sequoia, it's a minor pest. We have more than 50 other similar leaf roller moths and their natural predators in the state. So there's a very good chance that the real story is the moth's been here for a decade, the ecosystem's handling it. We may not need to do anything at all. It's not a question of, well, if we don't spray, do we need these questionable toxic ground treatments? We may not need to be doing anything, and for sure, there's no emergency. What's the emergency that we have to start doing? The absolute end-of-the-road strategy. In IPM, chemicals are the last resort. Aerial spraying is off the map. Aerial spraying is the thermonuclear option. We've gone straight from go to thermonuclear option with no environmental review. The whole thing needs to stop, and the whole notion of eradication in the 21st century with global warming and global trade and bugs coming in all the time means it's not rational. We can't spray for every new bug. I met with Secretary Kawamura on Thursday and learned that the state's definition of eradication is you spray this year, you trap through 3 life cycles of the pest. If you don't catch any, you declare it eradicated, and if it comes back next year, you spray again. They handed us a nice long list of their successful emergency eradication projects since 1982. I'm here to tell you it was the same bugs every year. I used to teach English. I know what eradication means. It means 100% elimination. It doesn't mean continuous chemical use and pesticide exposure. That's not integrated pest management. Don't let them tell you it is. Senator Migden said, two last things to say. I can feel Frank breathing behind me. Senator Migden said, it doesn't work, it isn't safe. I'll add a third, it isn't necessary. The last thing I'd like to say is you'll hear a lot from the state about if you walk out of your house and you see a green plant, anything green you see, the moth will eat. It has a 2,000 plant, it'll attack more than 2,000 plants. Well, what they actually know is that it's been found, not eating, just perched, on about 200 plants. And from those 200 plants, they've extrapolated that every related biological species in the same genus is not only a host plant, but will be eaten by it. There are things on their list that make no sense. The moth is a leaf roller. It requires the protection of a rolled leaf to mature. They have pines, they have redwoods, they have things on there that don't even have leaves. So what I want to say to you is, in my 5 minutes, I hope I've given you, or my 8 minutes, or whatever this has been, I hope I've given you just a taste of the holes in the science when you hear them present all the questions that might not be answered. The holes are equally big in the health science as in the agricultural science. So I'm sorry to say it, but you can't believe what you hear from the state on this one. Thank you very much.
And next we have Dr. Corey Reddish, Mill Valley physician.
I've been asked to speak to some of the potential health impact of the aerial spraying. Specifically, the influence on susceptible populations, which officially include children, pregnant women, and seniors, but really we're all susceptible. Everybody has a different capacity for detoxification. And I would also like to include chemically sensitive people in the susceptible population as well. So my main focus clinically is cleansing and detoxification. So the concept of having a population sprayed aerially with a substance of unknown toxicity is probably my worst nightmare for myself and for my clients, and for everybody, actually. So I have this glorious analogy. I just want to talk a little bit about toxicity and how the body processes toxins and a way we can look at this. And it's not a very glamorous analogy, but if you imagine your body, this glorious body, as a bucket, and even if we lived in a pristine environment, we produce toxins as a byproduct of our cellular metabolism. So if you imagine the bucket, it starts to get full just from our own physiological functioning. But gratefully, we're designed to be self-cleaning, so we get rid of those toxins. However, if you look at today's climate, today's environment, we're exposed to numerous toxins in our water, pesticides, dioxins, pharmaceuticals, etc. We also have a lot of chemicals that we're exposed to in our air, combustion byproducts, volatile organic solvents, that new car smell, on and on and on. And then you look at our foods. Again, we have pesticides, additives, preservatives, hormones. The bucket is starting to get very, very full. So if you add something like a pollen or a virus or an aerial spray, your bucket can overflow, and then you get signs and symptoms of illness. We know that toxins can contribute to almost any illness out there, aggravate it, cause it. So the way they operate is they influence primarily our hormonal system, our nervous system, and our immune system. So that can be anything from, with our immune system, recurrent infections, chronic allergies, autoimmune conditions. When it comes to our nervous system, anything from ADD, mood disorders, onto more chronic conditions like degenerative neurological conditions like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's. And lastly, with our endocrine system, that ranges anything from PMS to infertility and hypothyroidism. So that's just kind of to give you a general idea of how toxins influence our physiology. In this situation, again, it's been brought up several times that we don't really know what's being sprayed. So I look at this from a medical perspective in terms of the effect on our physiology in three ways. One, what is the influence and the effect of the active ingredient on our bodies? Not been studied. What is the influence of the microencapsulation, inhalation on our bodies? Well, we know if you inhale particles smaller than 10 microns, which, as Nan mentioned, is in the range, they can embed in the lung tissue. They can create lung inflammation, lead to respiratory disorders, contribute to increased hospitalizations from asthma attacks and increased asthma attacks, and increases in cardiovascular disease, including heart attacks and stroke. So for seniors, that's pretty big news right there. And just to come back to the bucket analogy, if you come back to here we are with our normal bucket, children have a smaller bucket. So they concentrate and store toxins 7 times more than adults. Why? They have a higher percentage of body fat, which is where a lot of toxins like to collect. And secondly, their detox mechanisms aren't fully developed until they're about 7 years old. So they have these smaller buckets. And just want to speak to some main concerns when it comes to kids. Asthma is the leading chronic illness in children. And in California, it affects about 12%, which is pretty high. There's been a 75% increase since 1980. So we already know that there have been reported respiratory conditions and increased incidences of asthma attacks as a result of the spraying. So this is definitely a consideration. Secondly is autism. There's been over a 600% increase since 1987. Again, autism is multifactorial, but we know that these kids have a hard time processing toxins. They are an especially susceptible population. So given that, and given that we don't know what we're spraying, and that the inert ingredients are unknown and it's unclear what their toxicity is, do we want to chance that? Is that something that the state would want to increase as a possible risk of autism? And lastly is, well, in addition, there's also been an increase in ADD, childhood brain cancers, and leukemia, which all have chemical toxicity components to them. And lastly is precocious puberty, which means going through puberty at an earlier age. The average age of puberty for young girls used to be 12 to 14 years old, and now they're showing signs of puberty between 7 and 10. And this is primarily because of the class of compounds known as endocrine disruptors. One of the inert ingredients is potentially an endocrine disruptor. And what this does is attach to our hormone receptors and influence how the hormones are modulated in our body. So the last thing, well, not quite the last thing. So I mentioned seniors already. So when you think about the bucket analogy, seniors generally have a pretty full bucket. They tend to have weaker immune systems and often already have chronic illnesses. So the burden on them is going to be quite substantial in terms of increased toxicity. And lastly, pregnant women. So pregnant women have a baby in the bucket. And the big question there is, can the fetus be exposed to toxins? Can it cross the placental barrier? Well, what they found is that if it's a fat-soluble toxin, it can. And a number of the inert ingredients are fat-soluble. They've done a study recently. Environmental Working Group has this up on their website, that they studied umbilical cord blood and found over 200 chemicals. So it's getting through the placenta. It can also be found in the amniotic fluid and also in the breast milk. One other thing of note is some new science that's coming out called epigenetics. And what that's talking about is you've got the direct toxic effect of the substance, of the chemical, which can contribute to birth defects or developmental delays. But then low exposure to a toxin is having what's called an epigenetic effect. And what that means is it can affect the DNA of the fetus. And so it may not show up immediately. It may show up later in life as cardiovascular disease, as diabetes, as cancer. So aerial spraying is a bit like playing Russian roulette with our health.
I'm going to divide my brief remarks into what happened before, what happened during, what happened after, and what we're looking at looking into the future. Before the spraying happened in Santa Cruz, where I live, it happened in Monterey. And when we heard about it, we thought, well, yeah, Monterey, that's awful, but they're not going to spray Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz is Santa Cruz. How could they think they could do that? And I share that with you because I hear some murmurings of that here, and I've heard it in San Francisco. They could never spray us here. And we learned the hard way that that wasn't true. The CDFA told us that the spray was safe, that it wouldn't make people or animals sick, but make sure to bring your pets inside and cover your patio furniture. Think for a minute about covering the things outside that you don't want to get sprayed. I heat my house with wood. I cover it with a tarp when it's going to rain. But when it's going to rain poison, I have to cover it in such a way that when the water hits the tarp and drips down, it doesn't go onto anything that I care about, like the earth, for example. I have a friend who works in a children's center. The children there play outside. They crawl on the ground. They play in a sandbox. Try covering all that so that the runoff doesn't go on anything the children are going to touch and then put their hands in their mouths. It's not simple. A simple instruction like cover your patio furniture is not simple when we're talking about this sort of thing. We spoke out before the spraying. We tried to stop it. People in high-risk groups spoke out. Some moved away. Some went away temporarily and then came back. I'm thinking tonight about the people who live in Ecology House here in Marin County, which I think is the first HUD-funded housing project for people with chemical sensitivities. The people that live there can't be sprayed. Can't happen. We need to stop it for their sake, among the rest of us. There were no plans made for monitoring illnesses from the spray because it wasn't dangerous. It wasn't going to make anybody sick, and besides, the state didn't want to know if it did. There was a health form, it's a generic health form that's for reporting suspected cases of pesticide poisoning that was circulated a little bit by our county health department and was posted on our city website. It has to be signed by a doctor, and most people didn't even know that it existed, including most of the doctors in the county. The CDFA claims that its responsibility is to give notice, and they said, and I've heard them say this in the scoping meeting in San Francisco last week, that every single person would receive notice of the spraying. Their idea of notice is 72 hours. Think about if you have some plans other than putting a tarp on your lawn furniture that you're going to want to enact when you know that the spray is happening, and you'll know that's not long enough. The way that they notified people in Santa Cruz County is that they bought a mailing list from one of the junk mail companies that sends around coupons, so anybody who doesn't want junk mail and opted out of that list didn't get their notification. Anyone without a home didn't get their notification. So that takes us to the time of the spraying. And I want to talk a bit about what does it mean that people got sick. First of all, 643 reports is a vast underreporting, and I want you to really clearly understand why. Neither the state nor the county was really collecting reports. This 643 cases came from this report, which was put out by Helping Our Peninsula's Environment in Monterey, collected through public records requests from people that called in or emailed into the state, and also collected through an email address and post office box that they set up on their own, that a few individuals set up on their own to collect reports because they saw that nothing was happening and people had to have a way to tell that they were sick. And these are available on the websites that you see linked on that you see on the banners up here. This report, you can look at it, actually has the actual reports that people made. So in some cases, one report represents 7 people in a family, so it's more than 643 people. But most people did not file a report anywhere, because either they didn't associate the symptoms they were having with the spray. Some of them didn't know they were being sprayed. There was a football game going on at the high school. During the spraying, the planes were flying overhead. They didn't know. The notification really was not good. They didn't know what it was even when they saw it happening. So people very often didn't associate the symptoms they were having with the spray, or they thought, well, yeah, but I knew I was going to be sprayed and I was worried about it, so I'm sure I'm just making it up. Or, well, yeah, I felt bad yesterday, but today I'm okay. Or if I feel okay if I still feel sick next week, I'll try to get an appointment with the doctor. Or I can't afford to go to the doctor, or I don't have time to go to the doctor. Or they went to the doctor and the doctor said, oh, don't be silly, it's safe. Very few doctors knew about any of the information that we'd been circulating about the dangers of the spray. Very few doctors were willing to make a report. There's no testing available to test for whether you're experiencing adverse effects to the spray. There's no treatment available from Western medicine, but you need to have a Western medical doctor sign the form. So you need to go to that kind of a doctor if you want to make a report. There's been a lot of work done in the holistic health community about detoxification, and on the websites there's various links to that if you're interested in finding out more about that. So the previous speaker spoke about the different systems of the body that were affected. The symptoms really range. It's a huge range of symptoms that people are having depending on what body system was affected and how severely it was affected. Some people had never had a headache before, or hadn't had one for 30 years and got a headache and then it went away. Some people are still sick. There are people with neurological effects where they're having involuntary movement of their head or other parts of their bodies. People who hadn't had an asthma attack in years suddenly having severe asthma, that sort of thing. And what the CDFA has then said is you can't, there's no way to prove that wouldn't have happened to you anyway. It's very much like that how hard it is to prove that one case of cancer came from a particular toxic exposure. But when you have what is clearly thousands of people sick right after the spraying, it's not coincidence any more than it's coincidence that there was the worst red tide in decades in Santa Cruz right after the spraying, and seabirds died because the protective coating on their feathers was stripped by the surfactant in the spray. Hundreds or perhaps even thousands of seabirds died. But they can't prove that had anything to do with the spray. So let's talk about where the burden of proof should be again. And it shouldn't be on us to prove this is dangerous. It should be on the state to prove that it's safe. And it's clearly not. A couple other quick comments. One of the really important things is that while we can document to some extent the short-term health effects, the long-term health effects are really unknown. And so this spraying program is a program that cannot succeed in its goal of eradication. And even if it could, might be doing so at severe risk to our long-term health, and the day after the moth was eradicated, it could be back. So we're really talking about a long-term dangerous exposure to millions of people for unlikely gain of any sort, except financial gain by a few corporations. Last week, Steve Lyle, spokesman for the California Department of Food and Agriculture, was on the KPFA morning show, and he said, checkmate was not likely the cause of the reported illnesses. So your listeners may hear about that in the coming segments on this subject, and we want them to know that the state has evaluated these reported illnesses and has concluded that checkmate was not likely the cause. I'd like to know what they did to evaluate the illnesses. I haven't heard of one person who's been contacted by them. There's still nothing set up in Santa Cruz or Monterey counties, or as far as I know in any other county, to monitor or treat anyone who gets sick from the spraying. We still have no idea of the long-term effects. The state and county public health systems are still doing nothing, and public health is not the CDFA's job. Their job, if you look at their website, is to promote the interests of the agriculture industry. And I want to remind you that, as the previous speaker said, the effects of toxic chemical exposure on humans and animals are cumulative. Basically, this is a grand experiment on us. I don't know what it's about. I don't believe it has anything to do with the light brown apple moth. Why was my urban neighborhood sprayed and the agricultural fields a mile away were not, and the orchards were not? It doesn't make any sense. But not only was this a massive experimentation on human beings, which is completely unethical, and on animals and the environment, they didn't even use standard scientific method, which would have dictated careful monitoring and analysis of the results of their experiment. I believe they didn't do the monitoring because they didn't want to know. Basically, they sent tens of thousands and are planning to send millions of canaries into the mine and not bother looking to see if they die. Thank you.
The EPA declared checkmate safe. They claimed that there was testing done in New Zealand, and as a result of the testing, there was no observable adverse impact on humans. It wasn't sprayed in an urban area. It was sprayed in rural countryside. So the first test on people happened in Santa Cruz and Monterey. That's the first test. Just last week, the EPA fired one of their toxicologists because she determined a chemical was unsafe and should not be used. What did the Bush administration's EPA do? They fired the toxicologist for the EPA. They don't even let those folks do their job. Anyway, Carolyn Cox is going to tell us about some of the inert ingredients. She's come over from Oakland.
My job tonight is to try to sort of explain quickly what the murky world of the so-called inert ingredients in pesticides is really all about. So don't think logically, just my apologies to anybody who's an attorney in the room. This is legal language. Our national pesticide law divides pesticide ingredients into two categories. One is what they call active, and one is what they call inert. But inert doesn't mean what you would think it means. It doesn't mean inactive or benign. In fact, this is a quote from the Environmental Protection Agency. An inert ingredient may have biological activity of its own, may be toxic to humans, and may be chemically active. In other words, it's a legal framework. It's not rational. And if it seems confusing and it doesn't make sense, that's exactly what it is. You might be interested to know how activists first became acquainted with the issue of inert ingredients in pesticides. And it happened a long time ago. It was in the 1980s. And there was a doctor in Japan who published an article in a very eminent medical journal about the herbicide, which I'm sure you've all heard of, called Roundup, which at that time was unfortunately, tragically, a common suicide agent in Japan. And what this doctor was exploring was, I mean, we've all heard that Roundup is completely non-toxic, right? How does it kill you if you want to commit suicide? And after examining the symptoms of a number of patients that this doctor had treated, he concluded that it was the inert ingredients in the pesticide that was actually causing the symptoms that resulted in death. So that kind of raised the question of, well, you know, if people are using it to kill themselves, what else is this class of ingredients doing to us? So here's kind of the basics that you need to know about inert ingredients in pesticides. One is that there's a whole lot of them. There's probably 3 or 4 times as many chemicals used as the so-called inert ingredients as there are active ingredients. And in any given pesticide product, those inert ingredients often make up 50, 90, 99% of the product. Many pesticide manufacturers claim that the identity of inert ingredients in a particular product is confidential business information. What that means is they won't tell you what they are. And there's been some legal work. Courts have ruled that this isn't necessarily the case, but most government agencies accept the manufacturer's claims. So if you want to know what you're being sprayed with, it's often very hard to find out. Another thing that's really important to keep in mind is that active ingredients are required under our national pesticide law to go through a fairly extensive battery of tests. Now, you all know, I'm sure, that there's many things that the tests miss, but inert ingredients are even worse. For many inert ingredients, EPA says existing data is plenty. In other words, if there isn't a study showing that there's a problem, we're not going to make you study it more in case you might find a problem. We'll just accept the lack of data. And then what I think is probably the most important issue with inert ingredients is that when you're exposed to a pesticide product, you're not exposed to one chemical or 2 chemicals. You're probably exposed to some large number. And it's that combination of chemicals that is going to be affecting your body and your environment. And the tests that are done on the combination of chemicals, the thing that you're actually exposed to, are basically some very short-term acute toxicity tests. But the questions that probably concern us all the most: does this pesticide cause cancer if you're exposed to it? Does it cause birth defects? Does it cause miscarriages? Does it cause genetic damage? None of those things are tested in the combination that you're exposed to. So to try to bring this back to apple moth spraying, we don't know what we're going to be exposed to when if things go according to plan and the spraying starts in August. The California Department of Food and Agriculture is still trying to decide what they want to expose us to. But I think it is worth looking at the product that was used last fall in Monterey. for that product, after a lot of hard work by some of the people here, the governor did order that all ingredients in the product be provided to the public. And so it's 11 different chemicals. And just a quick search, I used the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health database to just look at what hazards are known of these chemicals. So out of these 11 ingredients, 2 of them are what NIOSH would call a tumorigen. That's something that causes cancer. 3 of them are what NIOSH calls a primary irritant. That means it irritates your eyes, your skin, or your lungs. 1 causes reproductive effects like miscarriages and birth defects, and 1 actually causes allergic responses in people. So we have certainly enough to get us concerned, and certainly enough to demand that the spraying not go forward without full information being provided to all of the millions of people that will be exposed if this spraying takes place. Thanks.
Excellent.
I'm quite impressed with the science and the logic displayed by the panel tonight. I only wish that our government had this quality of science and was prepared to disclose it. I'm here to tell you that the genius of the law is that it is dynamic and responsive. Our Constitution guarantees every one of us the right to a safe environment, both at the state level and the federal level. We have a very impressive array of state and federal laws that give effect to those constitutional rights. And it now appears that we're going to use them to protect you. We have a multi-step plan in the offing. Step number 1 is force the government to tell the truth. I know it's a novel concept, but someday we will force the government to come clean on the 11 inert ingredients and on whatever else is hiding within these encapsulated little packages of poison. The state law is the Public Records Act. The federal law is the Freedom of Information Act. Both statutes provide that where the government fails to produce information required under those statutes, it will not only be forced to do so, but forced to pay the litigation costs of those who force it to tell the truth. So that's step number 1, get the facts. It's only through truth that we can accomplish justice. And justice for you means a safe environment for your children, for your pets, for everything you hold dear. That's pretty fundamental. It is guaranteed to you by constitutional fiat and by statute. I also wanted to go to step number 2, which is to elevate the discussion. We've heard dark rumors that the United States government might be behind this. The Department of Homeland Security might have a few bucks around that it's throwing into the fray. The U.S. Department of Agriculture apparently is vitally concerned to protect the agribusinesses that drive its policy decisions. Well, we've got news for them. There are even more federal statutes that protect your environmental rights than there are state. And federal judges can be pretty difficult when they find a federal agency hasn't been following the law and hasn't been telling the truth. 20 years ago, the northern spotted owl was unknown. Today, everyone knows that it beat the U.S. government. And it beat it in federal court, and it beat it because it had science and truth on its side. Well, you've got those things on your side here. To give you an example of the vast array of federal statutes at your disposal, once we get the truth told through the Freedom of Information Act, we segue into the Coastal Zone Management Act. We go to the Marine Mammal Protection Act. We go to the Endangered Species Act. We go to the Clean Water Act. We go to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. We go to NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. Each of those statutes says the government may not betray its sacred trust in the manner that we have witnessed in Monterey and Santa Cruz. Each of those statutes would prevent this outrage. We want to go to the source. What is driving this irrational, and madness that we've seen? And I believe it is found in the Bush administration at the highest levels, in the Department of Homeland Security and in the Department of Agriculture, an effort to place dollars over lives. That's wrong. We're going to prove that that's the case, and that's how we'll overcome the federal government's effort to sidestep all of these laws. At the state level, the state answers to the same kinds of crusty old judges as the federal government must. And those judges will want to know why it is that the public wasn't told what these ingredients were, that the public was exposed to what we'll call the American roulette system. Throw out 11 chemicals, take your chances. You're lucky, you only have 7 that can knock you off. That's wrong. The Public Records Act says they have to tell you what's in there, and they have to tell you promptly, within 10 days. If they don't do that, you can ask for attorney's fees and you can get an injunction against the program. There are other statutes. There's the Clean Water Act statute, known as the Porter-Cologne Act in California, that says you can't discharge from point sources, and an airplane has been adjudicated as a point source, by the way. So when an airplane sprays, it's like a gun, and it's shooting into the heart of the ecosystem, which is the watershed, and we all know that. It's where all life comes from. It's the water in the streams that makes it possible for the fish and the trees along the banks of the streams and for the ocean. So we will go to the source as well of the problem, and that's found again at the highest levels in state government, where they know about the deals cut behind closed doors to allow private industry to profit at the expense of public safety. There are venerable common law doctrines such as trespass, nuisance, public trust doctrine that forbid this kind of unknown, unseen, unexplained, but dastardly nonetheless harm to public health and safety. We have Prop 65. Many of you remember when that was adopted years ago by the public. That statute says they have to post a warning and tell everyone just how they're going to ruin your environment and harm your health. If we have carcinogens, teratogens in these inert ingredients, those should be listed under Prop 65. Those should be in warning labels. And Prop 65 has an affirmative protection for sources of drinking water. That is, any river, any pond, any aquifer that's used for drinking water, if it's subjected to the introduction of these poisons, that's a legal platform from which to launch a counterattack, a substantive attack, which says not only must you disclose, but if there are harmful ingredients that would pose hazards to drinking water, they shall not be discharged into drinking water. So I don't want to bore you with legal details, but we have tools. What we need is organization, we need fortitude, and most of all, perseverance. It took about 15 years for the northern spotted owl to stand triumphant over the carcass of the Forest Service and the logging industry. You too can do that. And it won't take 15 years. We're more streetwise now, we lawyers on the good side of this. So we're looking at a couple, 2-3 years of litigation, and we can push this back and make them regret they ever messed with us.
What a turnout. I am so impressed that the people of Marin County want to do something about this. By the way, I had met Stephen before, although not had the chance to have a conversation. And I got to tell you, Frank, don't let that guy get away. I go to closed sessions at our city council meeting when we're being sued or we're suing somebody. Nobody can talk about these things. But we've been talking for months about something called the Vineyard decision. Stephen's the plaintiff's attorney who won that case. Don't let him leave the room. Frank said I was an expert. I'm not an expert, I'm just a witness. I learned everything I know about this light brown apple moth and the spraying. I didn't even know what CDFA was last June or July, but I heard Monterey was having this little dispute with them and they didn't want to be sprayed, and I thought, oh, it'll never happen. You've heard so many of us say that here tonight, and I just have to tell you, I said that too. It'll never happen. It's no big deal. And then I started to learn what our state government is doing. I want you to understand something about our state government. The legislature did not direct that this spraying happen in any way, shape, or form. I went and did some research trying to figure out how on earth did someone, we didn't know who, order us to be sprayed. And I started checking it. I thought, well, the legislature must have done it. And I searched all the records of all the legislation. I found Senator Wiggins' bill that was passed unanimously by, I think, both houses of the legislature. And it says the state will provide money to the counties to help them deal with the light brown apple moth with whatever programs they put in place. And I thought, that's not what we're receiving. It's not a program that's administered by our county. Our county doesn't want this thing. And I started hunting around further, and I finally found the CDFA, one of the many administrative departments of the state of California. I'll bet a section of government that very few of you know anything about, the Office of Administrative Law, which permeates about 20 different departments in the administrative section of the state of California, state government of California, which does not answer to the legislature unless the legislature should pass laws to stop them from doing what they're doing. And when they want to do something like this spraying, they say, oh, well, we'll publish a notice of a proposed rule. The rule has the force of law. And so it goes into a register in Sacramento, and people who live and work in Sacramento may read it. We never knew anything about it. The rule was passed. A few more rules were passed. They modified the rules. We never knew anything about it. And all of a sudden, here's A.J. Kawamura, A.K. Kawamura, A.G. Kawamura. I'll never get the middle initial.
like ag.
Sitting in our city council chambers telling us why he's going to spray us. And we saw the same dog and pony show that so many towns around the Central California area have seen, where these guys come waltzing in. They dress better than I do. They are experts, and they know why we have to be sprayed because of this emergency, which they've been working on for about 2 years now. By the way, maybe Stephen will tell me if I'm right or not. The settled definition of emergency in California case law is something like this: a sudden unexpected occurrence that's causing immediate threat to life and property. There's probably a few more words in there too. This thing's been going on for 2 years. It's employing hundreds, maybe thousands of people, making some corporations rich. It's certainly not an emergency. It's just something that they want to do because they found a way to make a whole lot of money off of doing this. So I figured out who was doing it, and I found out they're not accountable to anybody but the governor. And you'll notice one of the goals up there, one of the actions, call Governor Schwarzenegger, write Governor Schwarzenegger. He can stop this thing. Well, I went to all those meetings, and I had a personal meeting with Mr. Kawamura, and he brought a couple of his experts in with him, a doctor. I couldn't believe that this doctor was telling me that it's okay for him to spray our community. A doctor. And Finally, after half an hour, and when I said, how can you call this stuff inert? Would you like it if I sprayed ammonium phosphate over your head right now, and would you breathe it, and would you be happy about that? That's one of the ingredients. In a few minutes, he said, I can see we're not going to get anywhere with this meeting. So, and by the way, these people really planned carefully. Mr. Kawamura is from Orange County, where they don't get fog, so he assumed he could just set down the schedule, he'd give us our 72 hours notice, and then they'd spray, and they'd be done with it. And there was heavy, heavy fog the first night. So they put up a thing on their webpage, we're not going to spray tonight. And then the next morning, we're going to spray tonight. And there was heavy, heavy fog. 5 nights in a row, there was heavy, heavy fog. One of those nights, they had a meeting of what's called their what do they call that? Their toxic task force or something like that. Environmental task force, excuse me. And they said, well, since we had the meeting today, we're telling you we're not spraying tonight, so we don't have to send any emails today. Anyway, to make a long story short on all this notice, they did mail out these notices to some people in our city, and nobody really got it right because some people were going to leave town, and so they did. And then they didn't spray, so they came back. And then they said they were going to spray, so they left. And then they didn't spray, so they came back. And after about 6 or 7 days, they couldn't really keep leaving town and paying hotel bills and stuff like that. And then after 9 days, they sprayed. And really, constructively, nobody had notice because it was on again, off again, because these guys didn't understand about fog. And then the next day, it poured rain, the most rain we'd had in a single rainfall in a long time. And a few days later, some people called me up, some interesting comments about our waterways. To get their permit, they had to assure that this stuff wasn't going to go on our waterways. And think about it, plane coming by at 160 miles an hour, 300 feet up. It's pretty loud, I'm sure you know if you've ever been off the end of a runway. So they're going to turn off the spray 100 feet from the San Lorenzo River. And then they're going to turn it on again on 100 feet on the other side. It kind of winds around. And they're going to keep it out of the bay. Well, there's the stuff that they did not keep out of the bay. I went down there and I scooped up about 5 gallons of this foam, took it down to the Santa Cruz High School chemistry lab, looked at that stuff, and I could see the capsules in there. That's what that brown stuff was. That thing's a mile long, 500 feet wide along our coast at Cowles Beach in the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary that's supposed to be protected. They sprayed that first night. Our police were out doing their job. Our fire department was out doing their job. They told us they were going to spray at 4 o'clock in the morning, but then when the day of the spraying came, they said, well, we can't really get it done if we spray at 4 o'clock in the morning. So we're going to spray at 8 p.m., which they did right on the money, and a couple days, I'm told, early. But we have an ambiance downtown. People come to coffee shops, go to the movies, about 1,000, 2,000 people walking up and down Pacific Avenue. They got sprayed. The merchants got sprayed. One of my students got sprayed because he doesn't watch the news. Our sports teams, we canceled one game. Our parks and recreation people got sprayed that work in the evening. And more importantly, I kind of jest a little bit, but there's a lady sprayed in Santa Cruz. She sent me photographs. She was in the hospital for 2 months. Much of her body turned red. Now, CDFA would say, well, you can't really prove that that's what caused it. There was a young child, I forget, I think 6 months old or something like that, in Monterey, had to inhale that stuff and went in the hospital and nearly died. There's lots of people that I know in Santa Cruz who, you can't, if there's an airplane spraying over your house, unless you seal it up with duct tape or something and then don't open it for a long time, you're going to get that air. And I had the tightness in my lungs, and I am not chemically, multiply chemically sensitive, but a lot of people are. A lot of those people we should think that are our canaries in the coal mine. And they did get sick, and they did feel bad for weeks or months. So 643 people later reported that when folks like Stop the Spray and the One Hope in Monterey did a huge outreach and said, tell us about this. And what we heard, by the way, at the recent scoping meetings is that the doctors didn't even know about this. And so when when someone would come to the doctor would say, okay, we'll go home and rest, or whatever it was they said. There's actually a prescribed procedure where the doctor is supposed to report these to the county health department. 7 of them were reported of these 643. So nobody knew. You cannot call this constructive notice by CDFA. Nobody knew what to do. So I want to talk about what we can do, because it is exciting that you're all here, but I've got one of those good news and bad news situations. If all of you write a letter tonight, I'm sorry, that's not enough. I mean, we all did in Santa Cruz, and that wasn't enough, but we had a crowd almost this big, maybe 2/3 this big last night. We're writing a lot of letters, and that's what I'm here to say. Write a lot of letters, make a lot of phone calls. I mean, start with 10 and then go on from there. You heard about the legislation, you heard about Carol Migden's resolution, but what's it going to take to get a resolution through the state Senate? It's going to take 21 state senators to vote for that. And that's just not your senator in Marin County. That's all the senators in Central California have to vote for that, to overcome all the ones in the ag area that believed and drank the Kool-Aid with Kawamura and think this is a great idea for us to be sprayed. So we've got a little bit of an uphill battle. But remember what Paul said? He said they don't listen. He's talking about the California Department of Food and Agriculture. There's only a few people that can stop this, those 21 state senators, those 41 state assemblymen that you have to reach. If you must have friends and family in other parts of this region that you can contact and tell them how important this is, and get them to write letters too, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take this many people from Monterey and from Santa Cruz and from San Francisco and from Marin and Oakland and Alameda and every other place that they're going to spray, calling your friends and neighbors, and all of us writing and calling. That's what it's going to take to get something done, because that's what it will take to persuade the legislature that they've got to put a stop to this, and or persuade the governor that he can put a stop to it. That's all that can help us. So write the letters, make the phone calls. Thank you all for coming tonight.
I did want to thank you all for coming. I think the important thing to take away from tonight is there's incredible movement here in California working to stop the spray. You folks are evidence of that. The folks working in Monterey and Santa Cruz, in the East Bay, in San Francisco, here in Marin. We are a movement of people working to stop this spray. And we've done an incredible amount of work so far. We've passed resolutions in Santa Cruz, in Monterey, in Berkeley, and in hopefully Oakland tomorrow night. Resolutions of governments opposing the spray. There are folks reaching out, working, devoting almost their entire lives. Many of the folks on this panel have sort of stopped doing their day job to keep doing this work. And there are many folks working through Pesticide-Free Zone and through Search for the Cause that are making this their priority campaign to work on now. So as you think about the incredible budget of CDFA, if you think about the $75 million, almost endless resources that's been given to the agency to carry out its spraying program, think about these small yet powerful citizens groups that are expanding into enormous citizens groups calling on the governor for change. Look at the envelopes on your seat. Look for some baskets at the back of the room. Dig into your pocket and think about how you can financially support these efforts too, whether it's legal efforts, whether it's to make the photocopies, whether it's to make these amazing banners, all of these. Dig into your own pocket, take out what you can. If you thought you could make a contribution of $10, make it $20, $50, make it $100. If you're thinking $100, make it $200, and look for one of these baskets at the back of the room. Put your contribution in it to support the efforts of folks working to stop the spray. Thank you.